is a biological phenomenon and not one related to socialization. So how can it happen? The explanation is hypothetical. It's an immunological explanation. And the proposal is that when a mother carries in an early pregnancy a male child, she starts to make antibodies against it. Every antibody is a foreign body to a pregnant mother, but especially is a male child. She doesn't have a Y chromosome, he does, and proteins synthesized as programmed from Y chromosome genes may then elicit the production of antibodies against that male child. So the diagram shows the analogous situation for the Rh factor. And the proposal is that there is an immunological memory so that in subsequent pregnancies where the embryo is male with an XY chromosome, the titer of antibodies increases over time, and in some subsequent male children, those antibodies have an effect on the reproductive development of subsequent male children. There's not very much evidence for this. Recently, some antigens, some protein products of male offspring have been known to elicit some kinds of immune responses in the mothers, but nothing to validate in a satisfying way to date that this is really the explanation for the older brother effect. Besides the older brother effect, the one observation that has been repeated over and over and over again is that gay and lesbian adults tended to behave in a gender atypical fashion when they were children. This is called childhood gender nonconformity. This is the young boy who turns down an invitation to play catch with his dad and would prefer to dress up in his mom's high-heeled shoes, or plays with Barbies when given a choice between traditional girl toys and trucks. Nonconformity in young girls takes the form of the tomboy who can beat any kid in the neighborhood in arm wrestling. There are data that I don't have time to report to you suggesting that this effect is the result of a previous commitment to a homosexual orientation, not the result of it. Just a little bit more about that perhaps later on. All right. Now, the question of whether or not these observations have a genetic basis. The tried and true method for making decisions about questions like this come from twin studies. So I can tell you that I know 6 studies now that have looked at twins and tried to determine the concordance between sexual orientation in the 2 members of a pair. 2 in the United States, one from a national twin registry in Australia, another one from a twin registry in Sweden, and most recently another one in Finland. They all show the same trend. So that, with a little bit of introduction, 10% of homosexual men tend to have gay brothers. In contrast to this value, which is the most conservative number that I know about the rate of male homosexuality in the Caucasian population. That comes from a very large study done in the United States at the University of Chicago, and it's based on identity. So in tens of thousands of people, not quite 3% of the responding males identified as gay or bisexual, and about half that number for females. This is probably low. If one uses same gender erotic feelings as an index of homosexuality, then these numbers increase. It's probably a safe estimate for us to believe that somewhere between 3 and 4% of the population are non-heterosexual. Now back to the twins. So in one of the studies that I referred to just a minute ago, you can see what the percentages are. Numbers like 9 and 11 are similar to the 9% that you see at the top of the slide. So that's the percent where there is no genetic relationships between the pairs. In fraternal twins, which is like two separate pregnancies that just happen to happen at the same time, the rate increases significantly, and for identical twins, the number approaches or sometimes exceeds 50%. Now, there's something very important I'd like to say about these numbers. They indicate without a doubt that there is a genetic component to homosexuality. There isn't any question about that. The question is, if it's a matter of genes, why isn't the concordance 100%? Why isn't it true that in every case of identical twins, if one of the boys is homosexual, why isn't the other one always homosexual? Well, population geneticists would attribute the variability that one cannot explain by genetics to, quote, environment. And the important message is that environment is not necessarily a non-biological factor. So I try to represent that in the following way. Most of the time, I suppose, when any of us were to try to define environment as opposed to genes, we would think of influences outside of the body of the individual. So I tried to represent those symbolically here by the family. Environment. How mom and dad raised the child. What were the interactions with siblings? But the explanation for why there isn't 100% concordance in the twin studies does not necessarily reside in that explanation for environment. Instead, it may well be, and there is some important evidence to suggest that environment here is within the individual, influences that act on the genetic constitution of that individual. So I tried to represent that with a double helix of DNA to represent genes here. And here's our friend the steroid molecule to represent the fact that hormone exposure in the